Yeah, thank you so much, Wusong. Thank you so much, Scott, for that wonderful intro. Again, my name is Corey. I'm a designer advocate here at Figma. Thank you. And I'm really excited to be here in Seoul today. And I'm going to talk to you about our April release notes, well, more specifically, all the features that released in April this year. So I'm going to get things started first with, maybe. Okay, sorry about that. I'll speak directly into the mic to make sure. All right. So I want to start things off with all the features that we released this April. But first, before that, I want to talk about one feature that you might have missed. So one of the features we shipped this month during April Fun Week was this feature called Fig Pals. So Fig Pals was a fun little feature where you could have a little character follow your cursor around the screen and do mainly just that. So that feature is no longer available, but in case you missed it, Fig Pals, the characters are still available in FigJam. So if you wanted to use that in FigJam, you can go into FigJam and you can search Fig Pals under the stickers here, and all those Fig Pals are now available to use in FigJam, and they still live on there. So in case you missed it, here are the Fig Pals are still here, and you can kind of use them in your Figma files, and they're nice little different variants and stuff like that. And of course, you can always paste them back into Figma and have fun with all that. So I hope you enjoy this. But on a more serious note, let's get into the actual, I guess the elephant in the room, which is Figma in Korean. Like, we launched Figma in Korean, and we're super excited about that. And I'm going to show you how to actually change your language to Korean really quickly. So if we are in the design mode here, we can go to the bottom right corner. It might be kind of small to see on the screen there, but there's this question mark icon. If you click on this question mark icon here, you're going to see an option that says change language. And if you change the language, you can see now we have an option for changing it to Korea and beta. All right. So it's going to take a second here to kind of just load up here, and it's going to refresh your file, and then you'll see that it should be all in Korean. So that's it. Now you have everything all in Korean. And of course, we're glad to have this and available to native Korean speakers. But while we worked really hard on this, we know it could always be better, right? So we're really excited to have you as a community hopefully contribute to making this the best localization it can be. So the way you can do that is to provide feedback to us, right? So it's currently in beta, and while it's in beta, we'd love to have you send feedback on if you feel there could be a better translation, if you feel there are things missing and things like that. It'd be great to have that shouted out or pointed out to us. So the way you can do that is going to that same menu here, and there is an option here where you can send feedback. And if you click on this, it's going to open up a form, and then you can send feedback on the Korean localization, and you can take a screenshot and feel free to write that in English or Korean and help us improve this localization to be even better than it is. So, and that's everything there for the Korean localization. Next, I want to talk more about design handoff. So next off, I'm going to talk about all the features related to design handoff in Figma. The first one I want to talk about is the new color picker in Figma. So I know for designers and engineers, for a lot of people in product, that accessibility has been top of mind. Everyone's wants to make the most accessible product, but I know like traditionally or historically in Figma, maybe that has been a bit more challenging to do that natively. Of course, you can use plugins, or you can use third-party services to do some of these things like making an accessible color palette. But we thought we wanted to make that a lot easier for you to do. So we made some improvements to the color palette. So just for reference, this is the old color palette, color picker here in Figma, and then here's the new color picker. The improvement we made here is we gave you an option to choose more accessible colors. So what that means is here, if I open up this color picker here, you're going to see there's actually a new look to it, right? So if I click on this top right corner here, this is the actual contrast checker mode. So you click on that, and you'll see like this square here, it changes slightly. There's a line going across here, and there's kind of a grid-like pattern on the top here. You can probably see that on screen. And at the bottom here, there's no grid. What this is indicating is basically the contrast ratio of the object is selected, and it's say contrast versus it's the background color here. So if we look up here on this area where it has the dotted grid pattern, this means that it's actually a suboptimal contrast, right? Contrast ratio. So if you have a background, say a gray, and you have this light color, that's obviously very hard to read, right? And we want to make that more accessible. So you can look at this and you say drag this down and choose a more accessible color, and that will give you something that is much more accessible. And you can see that it'll actually give you the contrast ratio live here. And this is actually live as well. So for example, if I have this selected and I move this from there to another, say, a layer, and you can see it changes slightly. If I move it on top of this layer, you can see it changes again, right? And because these colors are so close, it's probably, you know, the opposite, where I have to choose a light color to get a, you know, acceptable contrast ratio. So it's all in real-time dynamic, so really easy to use here. Along with this, we have a few options in here, right? So if you see here on the top right, it says AA. So in most cases, you want to go for at least like a AA standard of, you know, contrast ratio when it comes to like the foreground versus background color here. But depending on what you are creating, sometimes that's not enough, especially for like small text. When it comes to small text on a screen, sometimes you want to go for a AAA contrast ratio. So in this case, that's like a 4.5 to 1. When we can click that, and you'll see that this area here changes, right? And it gets, in this case, much narrower, right? So to have that very high AAA contrast ratio, it's in a much narrower scope here than it was before. So again, depending on what you're creating, whether you're making, say, small text or large text, or you're choosing graphics, you can choose the appropriate settings here to get the appropriate contrast ratio. And the one last thing I want to show here is, so if we kind of go back here, what was that there? So, oh yeah, I want to show how you can kind of snap it to the nearest color. So here, in this case, I want to choose this color around here, right? I think this is a nice color, but it's not in the acceptable range. So what I can do, if I hover over this button here, you'll see that there's a small dot that appears below, and this is like the nearest optimal contrast color. And if I click on this, it will snap the color selection to that. So then now you have an accessible color, right? So you can have your colors and it's like maybe slightly off, and then you can just go in here and you can just click on that and you can snap that there. So really easy to use. So yeah, I think that's mainly it for the new accessible color picker, but I hope you use it and I hope you can make more accessible design. Right, and let's move on to more features. We got a lot of things to go through, so I'm going to be quick here. The next feature here is another really good feature, also related to color. The first one is it's the eyedropper tool here in Figma. So if you're a designer, you're probably used to using the eyedropper tool, which is you can use like Control C, and you have this, you know, our color picker basically, right? And then you can choose a color based on whatever you're hovering on. But now this feature is also available in dev mode. So I'm going to switch over to dev mode here, and I can also choose this from the toolbar or use the same shortcut. So what this means is that for developers, it's also way easier to select colors than before. Previously, developers would have to go in here and they'd have to select a layer and then try to find that color and stuff like that, right? Which is, you know, it works, but it could be a lot easier, right? So now with the color picker in dev mode, you can hover on this right here and you can get the hex code, but even better than that, you can actually get the variable here. And this is what most developers probably want. As an engineer, they're not going to write the hex code every single time. You're going to actually use the same variable. So it works the same way as Figma in design. If you hold the shift key here, you can see that switches over and now it's highlighted. And if I click on this, now I've copied that variable name, not the hex code. So I think this is a small improvement that's going to save a lot of time for engineers. So if you're an engineer or if you're a designer and you have engineer teammates, definitely tell them, yeah, dev mode, new color picker tool, you got to try it out. Right. So going forward to the next thing, another quality of life improvement, I think, when it comes to handoff, is annotations. So annotations in dev mode, we've seen them for a while, and they're a really cool feature, but we thought they needed some more features to kind of make it even better. So you can see here at the looking at the annotations, we have something that looks a little bit different. We have these categories, right? So this is a new feature that shipped earlier this month. These are annotation categories. So you can set custom categories for your annotations within your file. In this case, I have, say, categories for, let's say, interaction. Oh, where am I going there? Sorry about that. I have categories here for interaction versus responsiveness and typography and things like that. And what this does is allows the developer to kind of look at individual pieces and understand what they're referring to, or just kind of like narrow this down, right? One of the things that you can do with this is, one, you can set these are custom categories here, right? So if I'm going into a annotation here and I click on this, I can change the categories here, right, for each one in this case to a different category, or I can go in here and I can edit the categories. I can rearrange them. I can change the colors for the categories. I can add a new category as well and delete that if I want to, and save them, right? So these categories are on a per file basis. So if you say create custom categories, those categories are would persist throughout the file in different pages. But if you create a new file, you still need to make rename those categories again. So what categories allows us to do is actually something that's really cool, which is to filter a lot of annotations. So if you have design that has lots of annotations everywhere, and you're a developer and you're coming in here and you're like, I just want to look at typography. Well, you can do that, right? So we can go in here and we can open this up and we can go to filter, click on typography, and now all I see is typography, right? So this gives me a much more clean, focused view to focus on just the things I want to see. But if I still want to go back in here and see the other annotations, I can hover on that and I can see this, right? And so this is, I think, a really good quality of life update for the annotations feature here. And if I want to go back here, I can go back and show all categories and revert that. The last update around here is annotations are now also available in design mode. So previously you had to be in dev mode to see or add annotations. And we got a lot of feedback from designers that, like, as a designer, you don't want to have to switch to dev mode just to add annotations and then switch back. It's a little bit cumbersome. So we heard you and we added the annotation feature to design mode here. So annotations is under comments here, or you can use, say, the Y key to activate that as a shortcut, right? And with this, there is a new default option here. So by default, annotations are always shown. But if you think, say, as a designer, maybe that's a little bit too much, you can actually turn that off. You can change the feature here. So if we go to, let me see. Sorry, no, that was under. I have to change I'll probably have to. Oh, here we go. So here is under the view options here. So you see this checkbox here for the annotations. If I remove this, this changes my default so that by default annotations are all hidden. And this is the same for both design and dev mode. And if I want to see them again, I can just select the annotations tool again. And then as soon as I select the annotations tool, then it pops up all the annotations that are there, right? So you can have this kind of clean view when you're just designing, and then when you want to go to add an annotation, you can have everything there. So this is all the updates around annotations. And next up, I want to talk about collapsing all layers. So this is a very, very small update, but maybe I think designers would probably be glad to use this. If you're like me, sometimes you're going in here and you're opening layers and things like that, and you're making edits. And this is it's great to do this, but sometimes you're like, well, this is there's too many things open. I want to make it cleaner, and I want to collapse these layers. Of course, there's a shortcut for that. And obviously, in Figma, there's always a shortcut for everything, right? So that shortcut is probably a little bit more obscure, and most people don't remember it. But it's actually like Option L. I could do that. But if you don't want to just remember this random shortcut for this really kind of niche case, we actually have a new button to toggle that here. So, for example, if I have all these different layers and they're all open in different areas, you can see that now there is icon here on the top right. If I click on this, it collapses all the layers and it makes that a lot cleaner, right? Yeah. So it's really small, but I know obviously it's a big update. And this is what all this month's been all about. This small but big updates, hopefully, to kind of like change, not completely change your experience, but just make things just that much easier to use, right? Next up, I want to talk about some things like corner radius and effects. So within the updates, a lot of the things we're thinking about is how do we make using Figma just more efficient? There's so many things and so many clicks and things like that. How do we save people clicks? We don't want you to spend more time clicking things in open menus than you need to. So this is one of the features where we kind of reduce that. In this case, this is about corner radiuses. So if you have an object here like this, it has corner radiuses. Previously, if you wanted to edit the corner radiuses, you would need to open a separate menu here, right? If you click on this, it would open a pop-up menu, and then you'd have to move your mouse to the pop-up menu to click an option to change those. So this has been changed now so that this menu is now inline. It's a very small, slight change, but now this menu here is inline in the same panel here. And when you leave and you go back to different objects, it still stays expanded, so you don't have that extra click to go and expand the menu to select a corner radius every single time, right? And I think it adds up a lot. It's just a very, very small change. So we're really thinking about ways like how do you reduce the clicks that you need to do to get to, to move forward in the work you're doing in Figma. So this is one place where we reduced the UI, but there's also places where we actually added UI because we thought that would actually be faster. So in this case, this is about like layer fills, right? So it used to be that when you're, say, selecting a fill or an effect, that every single time you added an effect, it would by default add a drop shadow, right? And then that you don't want a drop shadow, but you want it to like a layer blur or something like that, and you'd have to add a drop shadow, then click on the shadow and change that, and then within a separate menu, and then close that all out, right? So in this case, we thought it'd be actually smarter just to make that faster, right? So if you go here and we add, say, an effect here, instead of adding like a default drop shadow, this it still adds the default drop shadow, but it pops up into the detail settings here. So you can go straight into adding this drop shadow, or obviously you can change this to different effects here, and it's going to change the menu based on the context. So in this case, it's just like reducing the clicks by going, opening up the information you need faster. And that has been changed in many areas, like, again, like fills are the same as well. Before, when you added a fill, it would just add a default there, but now it automatically opens the color picker for you to go right into editing. Because most people, when they add a fill, they want to add something, a custom color. They don't want to use the defaults there. And it's just the same for everything else when it comes to things like strokes as well, to make it a more consistent behavior. So these are just super small changes, but just making your life a little bit easier and making things more efficient. And so moving on, I want to talk about variables. And this is another area I think we had a lot of feedback about things that could be more effective and more efficient. In variables in particular, it was around collections and modes, right? So one of the things I want to talk about here is, say, reordering modes, which was something you couldn't do before. So if you're a designer and you're creating a collection, if you had to basically decide what your collection, your mode order would be from the very beginning, and you stick to that, right? Because once you started creating this collection, you can't reorder that. That's how it used to be. But now you can do that, right? So in this case, we are here, and I think, let's see. Yeah, I think we're on the right color selection here. So we have our collection open here. What we can do is we can actually reorder our modes here. So in this case, maybe the default mode was, let's say, in this case, a light mode. We can change that and move that over to a dark mode. And you can see that, well, not only did I change that, I actually changed the default as well. So like the first column in your collection here is always going to be the default mode, and you can reorder your modes, freely, and these modes will be reflected in all the design that's attached to that, right? So I mean, it feels like maybe like really basic, but it was something that you couldn't do before, and it makes, I think, modes and collections much more flexible than they were before. So definitely, don't worry about like committing to the exact order of your modes now. You can just make them, and later on you can go and change your defaults and say I want to do a default light versus a dark or any other mode and things like that. And you just drag them to the different order. And then the second change we have here is around reordering collections. So again, previously collections were basically, I think, in alphabetical order, A to Z. But obviously, those aren't maybe the most intuitive order. If you're a design system creator, you probably want to have an order that makes more sense to you. So in this case, we gave you the ability to reorder things here. So you can see here, if I open up the menu and I choose the reorder option here, I can drag and drop these things, these collections, into an order that makes sense for me, and change that. So again, small updates, but around collections and modes, it's just much more flexible now, right? So we can reorder things like that. And if you want to go back to it and you say like, I want to go back to A to Z, I can click on this and bring it back to that previous order as well. And yeah, so that is it around collections and modes. All right, so these are the main updates around design handoff. I'm going to go back and talk about a few other updates in other areas of the product. The first one I'm going to talk about is Figma slides. So first up in slides, one of the updates we shipped was code blocks. So if you are an engineer, if you ever need to do a presentation and it shows code, now it's much easier because you can do that with code blocks in Figma. You can choose the language here, and you can choose the theme for your code, and you can manage that very easily through the code block widget here now in slides. Next up, we have PowerPoint import. So this is actually probably a big thing. A lot of people are probably coming from a different tool, most likely a PowerPoint, and they have a lot of stuff they want to bring over. So now you're able to directly import those into Figma slides, and it's basically the same as any other import. You click on the add and then import, drop your file in there, give it a second to load up, and then you open it up, and then it's all inside of Figma slides here. Of course, it's different file formats. Sometimes you have maybe small tweaks that you'll need to do, but in general, it's very accurate and a really helpful feature. Next up for Figma slides, we have inline video players and some updates on that. So previously on slides, if you had a video in your slide, you'd need to switch over to presentation mode to actually be able to view that video. Now when you're in edit mode, you can view that video, and it's a lot easier to kind of preview things. And also there's a few other features here, so around video defaults. So in this case here, when you have a video embedded, you can choose to set the video to loop, play sound, autoplay, all those defaults there. So when you go into presentation mode, those settings will be preserved. And next up on slides as well, I think this is actually a really big update for me personally, is now you have the ability to make components in slides. So previously, components, created in Figma design could be pasted into slides and they work just fine. But of course, you always have to open a separate Figma file and manage that separately, right? Now you can make components natively in Figma slides and manage them there. Much more simple and easier that way. And I think lastly we have here is transitions. So previously, I think the transitions in Figma slides were much more basic, where you could only set transitions on a per page level. Now they are able to be set on a per object level, so that you can see that there are these different layers here, and we can set different interactions per layer, and we can also set them to be in sequence. So like this, you can make a little bit more complex animations together. And coming up here, slide numbers I think was another big thing as well. For people wanting to make slide numbers and Figma slides, of course you can make the numbers there, but the new slide numbers feature here is much more dynamic. So you can add a slide number, add it to all slides, and that will dynamically populate the correct numbers on all your slides. And if you reorder slides, delete slides, add slides, it's going to update and stay that way. So it's a really useful feature there. All right, next up I want to go to the lightning round. We're going to go very quickly on some new features that have launched. The first one is in FigJam. So FigJam, now we have a lot of useful icons for engineers, especially people who are working in infrastructure. Things like AWS, you can go in there and use an icon for a database versus a EC2, etc. Right? So from like AWS, I think we have Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure, you can use this icon set. It's in FigJam by default now. So if you have say infrastructure engineer friends, tell them you should be using FigJam here. All right, and this is a super small, maybe you noticed it, maybe you didn't, but so in the file browser, we actually made a small update to the way files are displayed to make it easier to understand which file is in which format, basically. So you can see here on the bottom left corner, there's actually an improved kind of icon here. So you can see this is a slides file versus a FigJam file versus a design file. And if you're like me and you have a Figma account that's in multiple organizations, there's an icon here for the organization so you can know which organization this file belongs to. And it makes it just a little bit easier to navigate things and know where it belongs. And then going up here, and then one of the last updates we have here is on prototyping. So when you add interactions via AI in prototyping, I think previously there was an indicator between if you added that interaction manually or it was generated via AI. So now all interactions that are generated via AI have this kind of unique shimmer effect. It's kind of like this shiny arrow you can see here, and that will persist so that when you make manual connections, you can know which ones you created and which ones Figma AI created. This is actually one of my favorite ones here. So these are smart symbols, basically. I think in some fonts they were supported, but now it's much more widely supported across different fonts here. So what this is basically, if you're typing, say, multiple characters, you can use that will change into symbols here. For example, if you want to type arrows, left and right, up and down. Actually, like viewing this one, I used the left and right arrows a lot, but I never knew how to do up and down arrows. So like through this demo here, I actually learned how to do the shortcut for creating up and down arrows, which is really helpful and things like that. So this should be supported across any font that has these symbols. You'll be able to input it like this and then get the correct symbol there. So definitely try it out. And I think last but not least, we have UI3. UI3 is now the default in Figma, and I think some people maybe are still using UI2. So UI2 will be unavailable from the 30th of this month here. So April 30th, everything by default will go into UI3, Figma's current UI. All right, and just to recap that, we had a lot of really fun features all around design handoff. And then on Figma design, things like the accessibility color picker and annotations and things like that, slides, code blocks, and we had the PowerPoint import and many things like that, and also FigJam icon sets for infrastructure, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed all these features, and yeah, thank you so much for coming today.